The spotlight catches her sequins first, thousands of them, adorning a custom-made outfit that hugs her famous silhouette. At 79, Dolly Parton still commands the stage with the same infectious energy that defined her six-decade career. The audience roars as she launches into Jolene, her voice remarkably preserved, if slightly weathered by time. But beneath the rhinestones and that signature blonde wig, behind the practiced smile and self-deprecating quips about plastic surgery, lies a woman who has spent nearly 8 decades outrunning her own shadows. Tonight, as she gazes across the sold-out arena, few can see the toll that being Dolly has taken, the endless giving until there's nothing left, the crushing weight of being everyone's beacon while privately navigating her own darkness, and the profound loneliness that comes with outliving nearly everyone who knew her before she became an icon. But to understand how we got here, to truly comprehend the bittersweet reality of Dolly Parton at 79, we must return to the hollows of the Smoky Mountains, where a child with nothing but hunger and harmony began a journey that would reshape American music forever. This is the story of how a girl born into poverty in the backwoods of Tennessee transformed herself into one of the most beloved figures in entertainment history, but paid profound personal costs along the way. We'll explore how Dolly's unrelenting work ethic, born of desperation, both fueled her unprecedented success and exacted a devastating toll on her health, relationships, and sense of self. If this journey through the complexities of fame, sacrifice, and resilience moves you, tap like so others might find it too, because beneath the caricature of big hair and bigger personality lies a story of profound human struggle and triumph that speaks to something much deeper than celebrity. The floor was dirt and the roof leaked. This was home for Robert Lee Parton, his wife Avie Lee, and their eventually 12 children in a one-room cabin nestled in the isolated mountains of Sevier County, Tennessee. It was here, on January 19, 1946, that Dolly Rebecca Parton entered the world, the fourth of what would become an even dozen siblings. The doctor who delivered her was paid with a sack of cornmeal. Such was the grinding poverty that defined Dolly's earliest years, a hardship she would later transform into her signature song, Coat of Many Colors. "We were poor, but we had love," Dolly often says, but poverty's sting cut deeper than mere financial lack. When young Dolly arrived for her first day at the one-room schoolhouse in Locust Ridge, wearing that famous patchwork coat her mother had lovingly stitched together from rags, the other children's mockery left wounds that even global adoration would never fully heal. "They laughed at me and made fun of me," she recalls. "It hurt so bad, and I didn't understand why they were making fun of my coat." This early lesson in cruelty became a formative moment, teaching her both about human callousness and the power of maintaining dignity in the face of shame. Music provided the first real escape. By age 6, Dolly was already composing her own songs on a homemade guitar, finding in melody what life denied in material comfort. Her maternal grandfather, Jake Owens, a Pentecostal preacher who played fiddle, recognized the extraordinary gift in his granddaughter and became her first champion. It was Reverend Owens who invited young Dolly to perform in church, where her crystalline voice lifted above the congregation, offering a first glimpse of a talent too expansive for mountain hollers. The Parton household itself was steeped in the ancient ballads and mountain hymns carried over from the British Isles. Avie Lee, though overwhelmed with endless childbearing and homemaking, sang constantly to her children, planting the seeds of musical tradition that would later bloom in her daughter's unparalleled songwriting. Robert Lee, though illiterate and working multiple jobs to feed his oversized family, instilled a work ethic in Dolly that bordered on relentless, a double-edged inheritance that would simultaneously propel her to success and push her toward collapse. By age 10, Dolly was performing on The Cass Walker Farm and Home Hour, a local Knoxville television show. Uncle Bill Owens, recognizing his niece's extraordinary potential, began driving her to radio stations and small venues across Tennessee. The child with the big voice became a local curiosity, earning a few dollars here and there, money that went straight back to her family. Even as a child, Dolly understood that her talent was currency, perhaps the only kind her family had access to. The day after her high school graduation in 1964, 18-year-old Dolly boarded a bus to Nashville with nothing but her guitar, a suitcase full of songs, and an unshakable belief that she was destined for something greater. What no one could see then was how this determined teenager carried invisible burdens alongside her dreams, the weight of family expectations, the responsibility of eventually helping lift her siblings from poverty, and a growing understanding that becoming Dolly Parton might require sacrificing simply being Dolly. As she stepped off the bus at the Greyhound station in downtown Nashville, the neon lights of Music Row glittered in the distance. But Nashville in the mid-1960s was still very much a man's world, a place where female artists were expected to look pretty, sing the songs men wrote for them, and express gratitude for whatever opportunities came their way. The soft-spoken mountain girl with the cartoonish curves and ambitious dreams would have to develop steel beneath her femininity to survive what came next. Nashville in 1964 was not immediately impressed by the country girl with the exaggerated makeup and unusual voice. Dolly's first break came not from singing, but songwriting. She signed with Combine Publishing and began writing hits for established artists. Her compositions caught the attention of country star Porter Wagoner, who, in 1967, invited the 21-year-old Dolly to join his television show as a replacement for his previous female singer. The exposure from The Porter Wagoner Show, which reached millions of rural viewers, catapulted Dolly into country households across America. But the partnership that launched her career also became her first taste of the cage that fame would build around her. Wagoner, 20 years her senior and accustomed to complete control, saw Dolly as his protégé and property. Their professional relationship was complicated by power dynamics that would haunt Dolly for years. "Porter controlled everything I did," she later reflected. "What I wore, what I sang, how I performed. He meant well, but I was suffocating." For 7 years, Dolly remained in Wagoner's shadow, learning the business but increasingly aware that his vision for her career would never match her own ambitions. Their duets topped the country charts, but Dolly's solo efforts were repeatedly constrained by Wagoner's interference. The mounting tension culminated in 1974 when Dolly made the painful decision to leave the show and strike out on her own, a decision that would cost her emotionally and financially. The night before telling Wagoner she was leaving, Dolly sat in her Tennessee home and penned what would become one of the most famous farewell songs in music history, "I Will Always Love You." The next day, she sang it to Porter privately in his office. He wept, then immediately shifted to anger and threats of legal action. The price of Dolly's independence was steep. She surrendered significant publishing rights to Wagoner to secure her release, a financial wound that would take years to heal. Free from Porter's control but now facing the male-dominated music industry alone, Dolly embarked on a reimagining of herself that revealed her business acumen but demanded exhausting personal compromise. She amplified her image, bigger hair, tighter clothes, more exaggerated makeup, creating a caricature that both protected the real Dolly and trapped her in a persona she could never shed. "It's a good thing I was born a woman," she often joked, "or I'd have been a drag queen." The self-deprecating humor masked a calculated strategy. By becoming a living cartoon, she disarmed critics who might dismiss her and created a brand instantly recognizable across cultural boundaries. But the cost was a profound disconnection from her authentic self, a splitting that few outside her inner circle could fully comprehend. The late 1970s brought crossover success with hits like "Here You Come Again" and film roles in 9 to 5 and The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas. By 1980, Dolly Parton had transcended country music to become a global entertainment figure. Album sales soared into the millions, tours expanded internationally, and her face appeared on magazine covers worldwide. She had achieved what no other female country artist of her generation had managed: true multimedia superstardom. But then the grueling pace began exacting its toll. In 1982, while promoting The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas, Dolly collapsed backstage after a television appearance. Diagnosed with severe exhaustion and internal bleeding caused by stress ulcers, she was forced to cancel performances for the first time in her career. This physical breakdown marked the beginning of health struggles that would shadow her for decades, struggles she would carefully conceal from the public eye. "I was trying to do everything, be everything, for everybody," she later admitted. "I didn't know how to say no." The relentless schedule, recording albums, filming movies, performing concerts, launching business ventures, left little time for personal recovery. Friends from this era recall a Dolly who would work 18-hour days, then spend nights writing songs instead of sleeping. The 1980s brought another painful turn. After years of struggling with her weight, a battle intensified by Hollywood's unforgiving standards, Dolly began a cycle of extreme dieting that would eventually damage her metabolism permanently. "I tried every crash diet in the world," she once revealed. What the public didn't see were the fainting spells backstage, the private tears over cruel tabloid headlines, and the growing dependence on physicians who promised quick fixes for exhaustion. In 1984, severe abdominal pain led to partial hysterectomy surgery. At 38, Dolly faced the finality of never having children, a private grief that contrasted sharply with her sunny public persona. Though married since 1966 to the intensely private Carl Dean, Dolly had postponed motherhood for her career, always believing there would be time later. The surgery triggered a profound depression that few outside her closest circle witnessed. "Not having children is one of the greatest sorrows of my life," she would later confess in a rare moment of public vulnerability. "It wasn't meant to be, I guess." The pain of this loss was compounded by the growing distance between her and Carl, as her global fame and his fierce need for privacy created parallel lives that occasionally intersected but rarely merged. By the late 1980s, Dolly's career experienced its first significant downturn. Country radio began rejecting her more pop-oriented sound, while the pop world viewed her as a novelty act. Albums like Rainbow and White Limousine struggled commercially. Concert attendance dwindled. The entertainment industry, always hungry for fresh faces, seemed ready to relegate Dolly to legacy status before she'd turned 45. But then came a dramatic reversal that revealed both Dolly's resilience and the toll of constantly reinventing herself. In 1992, Whitney Houston's cover of "I Will Always Love You" for the Bodyguard soundtrack became one of the best-selling singles in music history. The royalties, estimated in the tens of millions, poured in, vindicating Dolly's songwriting genius. Yet even this triumph carried a bittersweet edge, as new audiences discovered the song through Whitney rather than its creator. On May 30, 1991, Dolly was alone in her Nashville office when searing pain shot through her abdomen, dropping her to the floor. Unable to reach the phone, she lay there for nearly an hour before her assistant found her and called an ambulance. At Vanderbilt University Medical Center, doctors discovered extensive internal bleeding requiring emergency surgery. The diagnosis was devastating: endometriosis so severe it had damaged multiple organs, compounded by complications from her earlier hysterectomy. The surgery required 5 blood transfusions and left Dolly facing a recovery measured in months, not weeks. For the first time in her adult life, the perpetual motion machine that was Dolly Parton was forced to stop completely. Tour dates worth millions were canceled, film projects were postponed indefinitely, and in the stillness of recovery, the woman who had spent decades running from silence was finally forced to confront it. "I thought I was dying, and maybe part of me wanted to," she later confided to a close friend. "I'd been Dolly Parton the entertainer for so long, I didn't know who Dolly the person was anymore." During this period of enforced rest, Dolly confronted hard truths about the punishing pace she had maintained and the relationships sacrificed at the altar of her ambition. The realization that few people outside her family truly knew the woman behind the wigs forced a reckoning with identity that would reshape her remaining decades. The years following her health crisis became what Dolly calls her dark period, a time when the carefully constructed facade began showing dangerous cracks. Though she returned to performing within 6 months, something fundamental had shifted. The boundless energy that had defined her public persona required increasingly more effort to maintain. Chronic pain became a constant companion, managed through a combination of prescription medications that sometimes left her foggy and disconnected during interviews and performances. By 1994, though financially secure through her songwriting catalog and business ventures, Dolly faced a creative crisis. Nashville had embraced a new generation of female artists like Shania Twain and Faith Hill, whose polished pop country sound made Dolly seem like a relic from another era. Her album, Slow Dancing with the Moon, barely registered on the charts. Concert attendance dwindled further, with some venues reduced to half capacity. The industry that had once embraced her now treated her as an afterthought. This professional rejection coincided with a period of intense personal loss. Between 1991 and 1998, Dolly lost several key figures in her life: her father, Robert Lee Parton, in 1991, her longtime manager, Sandy Gallen, in 1995, and 2 of her siblings to illness. Each death chipped away at her emotional foundation, leaving her increasingly isolated in her grief. "I smiled through so many shows when my heart was breaking," she later revealed. "Nobody wants to see Dolly Parton cry." The obligation to maintain her public image while processing private pain created a dissociation that sometimes manifested in concerning ways. Friends from this period describe a Dolly who would switch between profound melancholy and manic cheerfulness within moments, a psychological coping mechanism that worried those closest to her. The late 1990s brought another painful recognition. Despite her business acumen and groundbreaking achievements for women in entertainment, the industry still didn't take her seriously. Her intelligence was routinely underestimated, her creative contributions diminished, and her business ventures treated as vanity projects rather than legitimate enterprises. "I look like a woman, but I think like a man," became one of her defensive refrains, a statement that reflected both her strategic mind and the painful compromises required to navigate a sexist industry. Perhaps most poignantly, this period forced Dolly to confront the cost of fame on her marriage. Though she and Carl Dean had maintained their union since 1966, the relationship had evolved into something few would recognize as a traditional marriage. Carl's complete absence from public life led to persistent rumors that he didn't exist at all, a conspiracy theory that hurt Dolly deeply, but that she felt powerless to counter without violating Carl's privacy. "We're together in our own way," she would say when pressed. The truth, that they often lived separate lives, meeting occasionally at their various properties, was more complicated than the fairy tale narrative of unwavering support that her public relations team preferred. While never questioning Carl's love, Dolly faced the painful reality that the very success she had pursued had created an unbridgeable distance between them. By 1999, approaching her mid-50s, Dolly Parton stood at a crossroads. Her commercial relevance had waned significantly. Health issues, including the first of several procedures to address problems with her vocal cords, threatened the instrument that had defined her career, and the perpetual performance of Dolly Parton had left her emotionally depleted, unsure if she could continue the exhausting maintenance of her public persona. In a rare moment of public vulnerability during a 1999 interview, a tired-looking Dolly admitted, "Sometimes I look in the mirror and don't know who that woman is anymore. Is she me, or did I create her? And if I created her, can I ever let her go?" The question hung in the air, unanswered, capturing the existential crisis facing a woman who had become indistinguishable from her own myth. The new millennium brought an unexpected renaissance for Dolly Parton, one rooted not in commercial calculation but in authentic artistic expression. Beginning with 1999's The Grass is Blue, Dolly returned to her Appalachian roots, releasing a trilogy of bluegrass albums that earned critical acclaim and reintroduced her to a new generation as a serious musician rather than simply an entertainment icon. These stripped-down recordings, featuring minimal production and showcasing her still remarkable voice, represented a form of musical homecoming that seemed to heal something essential in her spirit. "I went back to where I came from," she explained, "and found myself waiting there." The bluegrass projects earned her Grammy Awards and the respect of a music industry that had previously dismissed her as a novelty. More importantly, they reconnected her with the purest expression of her artistic voice, the mountain girl who sang because it was as natural as breathing. This creative rebirth coincided with a profound shift in how Dolly approached her legacy. In 2000, at age 54, she significantly expanded the Dollywood Foundation and her Imagination Library program, which provides free books to children from birth until kindergarten. What had begun as a small tribute to her father's illiteracy became a massive philanthropic enterprise delivering millions of books annually to children across multiple countries. Through this work, Dolly began redefining success not through chart positions or ticket sales, but through tangible impact on future generations. By her mid-60s, Dolly had achieved something rare in entertainment: elder stateswoman status combined with genuine cultural relevance. Young artists from Taylor Swift to Miley Cyrus cited her as a primary influence. Her business empire expanded to include resorts, dinner theaters, and production companies. And her songs, particularly Jolene, 9 to 5, and I Will Always Love You, became embedded in the American musical canon, covered by artists across genres and generations. Yet this late career triumph came with bittersweet recognition. As Dolly moved through her 70s, the physical toll of decades of performing became increasingly difficult to disguise. Multiple surgeries for carpal tunnel syndrome, the result of years of playing guitar and piano, left her with chronic pain in both hands. Her trademark wigs became not just a style choice but a necessity after damage from decades of bleaching left her natural hair thin and fragile. and the cosmetic procedures that had once been a punchline in her self-deprecating humor became more extensive, a battle against time that even Dolly's considerable resources couldn't ultimately win. "I'll never retire," she declared on her 75th birthday in 2021. "I'll just drop dead in the middle of a song on stage someday, and I hope it's a long one." The joke, delivered with her trademark cackle, masked a deeper truth. After decades of defining herself through work, Dolly couldn't imagine life without performance. The stage had become both her oxygen and her prison. At 79, Dolly Parton's daily reality would exhaust someone half her age. She still rises at 3 a.m., a habit formed during childhood when early mornings provided the only quiet in a house overflowing with siblings. She maintains a rigorous business schedule, overseeing her various enterprises with the same attention to detail that characterized her rise to fame. And she continues writing songs with the discipline of someone still trying to prove herself, often completing 2 or 3 in a single morning session. This unrelenting pace comes at a cost that becomes more visible with each passing year. Those in Dolly's inner circle speak cautiously of health concerns that the public never sees: the private medical team that travels with her, the carefully scheduled rest periods built into her appearances, and the increasing difficulty of maintaining her energy through long performances. Yet any suggestion of slowing down is met with the same response: "The day I stop working is the day I stop breathing." Perhaps the most poignant aspect of Dolly's late years is the profound loneliness that accompanies outliving so many who knew her before fame. Of her 11 siblings, only 7 remain. Porter Wagoner died in 2007. Childhood friends from Locust Ridge have largely passed on. Even many of the musicians who accompanied her rise through the 1970s and 80s have departed. "It's hard being the one left standing," she admitted in a rare reflective moment. "Sometimes I feel like the last witness to my own life." Her relationship with husband Carl Dean remains one of the great mysteries of her biography. Now, in their 57th year of marriage, they maintain the same carefully negotiated distance that has defined their union for decades. Carl, now 82 and reportedly in declining health, continues his complete absence from public view. While Dolly speaks of him with unwavering affection, those closest to her understand that their connection exists in a space separate from conventional definitions of marriage, a union built on mutual respect for each other's fundamentally different needs. As she approaches her 80th birthday, Dolly Parton represents a profound paradox: a woman who achieved everything she dreamed of, yet paid prices she never anticipated. Her journey offers several powerful lessons about the nature of fame and resilience. First, that great success often requires a splitting of self, the creation of a public persona that, over time, can consume the private individual beneath. Second, that the very traits that enable unprecedented achievement, relentless drive, willingness to sacrifice, and ability to endure pain, can become destructive forces when left unchecked across decades. And finally, that true legacy isn't measured in awards or album sales, but in the lives touched and the doors opened for those who follow. In 2022, Dolly was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, an honor she initially tried to decline, feeling unworthy of the rock designation. Her humility, genuine rather than performative, revealed a woman still struggling to fully recognize her own towering influence on American music. The standing ovation that greeted her that night in Los Angeles seemed to momentarily penetrate the carefully maintained barrier between Dolly the icon and Dolly the person, bringing tears to eyes famously disciplined against public vulnerability. "I didn't think I'd earned it," she said softly into the microphone, her voice catching. "I still don't know if I have. But I promise to try to earn it from this day forward." In that moment of rare uncertainty, the artifice fell away, revealing the shadow that has followed her remarkable journey, the persistent fear that beneath the wigs and rhinestones she might still be the poor mountain girl others once laughed at, unworthy of the love the world has given her. The spotlight catches her sequins one more time as she takes her final bow. At 79, Dolly Parton stands alone at center stage, simultaneously the architect of an unparalleled legacy and a woman still seeking validation through the roar of the crowd. Her journey from the dirt floor cabin in Locust Ridge to global iconography represents both the fulfillment of the American dream and a cautionary tale about its costs. Behind the carefully constructed image, maintained through decades of discipline and sacrifice, remains a woman of profound contradictions. Boundlessly generous yet intensely private, universally beloved yet deeply lonely, financially powerful yet emotionally vulnerable. Her tragedy isn't found in career failures or public scandals, but in the quieter price paid for extraordinary success, the parts of herself surrendered in service to becoming Dolly Parton. If this exploration of fame's complicated bargain resonated with you, please tap like and subscribe to support more nuanced storytelling about our cultural icons. Which aspect of Dolly's journey struck you most powerfully? Her creative resilience, her philanthropic vision, or the personal sacrifices demanded by her unparalleled drive? Share your thoughts below. In the end, perhaps Dolly herself best captured the bittersweet reality of her remarkable life. When asked once what she hoped people would say about her 100 years from now, she paused, the practiced smile momentarily giving way to something more authentic. "I hope they say, 'Dang, she looks good for her age.'" The joke, like so many aspects of Dolly Parton, contains deeper truth than first appears, a woman who gave the world everything while keeping just enough of herself to survive the giving.